Welcome everyone to the RTG Baseball Podcast, where we travel down to road to glory 1 week at a time. We're gonna break down the week that was in fantasy, check out the leaders in the league, and then pivot to this week's IRL baseball topic, which is really gonna be how to survive being under 500. I'm your host and commissioner, Coach Will, and I'm joined tonight by your resident Red Sox fan and serial third place finisher, Coach Andrew.
We're on to week 13.
On to lucky 13. Yeah, we're now definitively past the halfway point, and something very interesting has played out. I don't remember the last time I've really seen a breakdown like this, and what I'm talking about are the standings, the RTG Baseball standings at the end of the last matchup. Just the perfect combination of upsets that happened to create a we have a top 4, which is pretty standard. So we got 2 teams at 10-3 and Nick and Nate. And then 2 teams at 9-4, Show and myself. And then every other team in the league right now is under 500. We got 3 teams at 6-7, 2 at 5-8, and the rest at 4-9. This is bizarre. Like, if the season ended right now, that would mean 3 of the 7 playoff teams are under 500.
Yeah, is this a case of art imitating life?
Well,
the expanded MLB playoffs.
I know. Well, that's why I said. That's why, I mentioned the IRL baseball segment. Is this feels like what the American League is right now, and I'm sure actually even the National League, when you go deep into the 3 wild cards, you're gonna get like a close to 500 team. Maybe we'll see how it all shakes out. But especially the American League, uh, and I have our standings pull up right now, and I'm just comparing some points for to points against, because you kind of would expect, because everyone faces everybody. So in the end, you'd have like 6 teams over 500 and 6 teams under 500 and 6 teams whose points for are greater than their points against, and vice versa. But we have Brian. He, although is 6-7, he has a positive point differential. I will name that stat right now. So his points for are greater than his points against. Eric is just about even. Technically, he's in the negative, but he's been scored against him like 8 more times than he scored for. But that's basically 500. And then everyone else has a negative point differential. But it's just weird. Like, I know, like, maybe it'll even out. It's just a weird thing to see.
Yeah, when with more than half the teams making the playoffs, you would expect at least one of them um, would be below 500, and so toss in some statistical noise, and maybe it's not the most improbable outcome of all time, especially at the sample size that we're looking at this point in the season. You know, it's not like we're dealing with, 162 game season. It's, you know, week by week. So,
No, but we do have 13 decisions so far. That's 12 matchups, and one of them you get double matchup. It's definitely not nothing. A fun exercise, if anyone's following along, is if you go to the standings page and then click the back column with the word back, so that sorts that column, and sort it from least to greatest. That's how many points behind the league leader in points for you are. Is very funny because we go Nick and Show, like Nick has the most points and Show the second most points. So okay, that makes sense. Then Brian is next under 500, and then Nate over 500, then Matab under 500, then me over 500, then Eric. It's like a zigzag of the
Mm.
over 500 and under 500 teams in terms of because this could be like you could start and get the same thing on points for on that column, but this is just like if you want to know not just how many points you score, but compared to the highest scoring teams, how many points you're scoring. This is what shows that. Like the biggest jump is between if you sort this way, between Matab and I, and then the next jump is between Eric and you, and then the bottom of Raj, Phil, and Rachel are real down there. They're way behind the pace. Um, yeah, I just wonder. You know what this is going to cause? Just like in real life, this is going to cause confusion at our trade deadline. Like even
Mm.
if you were even if you were contemplating being brave and making trades, uh, if you're at 500, like sure, it means that the last place team is only 2 games out of a playoff spot, but you have to jump everybody to do that.
Yeah. But you do almost wonder, suppose it depends on how you get there and what injuries you're working with. In some ways, it feels like it would be more realistic for a team in fantasy to make a run at it.
How
You
so?
know, I don't know. It's there's a couple things like players having hot weeks, and you're also not necessarily it's not like your players are playing their players. They're playing their own games against you know
Yeah, you're dealing
different
with
teams.
the ups and downs of your own players and just hoping you don't run into the
Yeah.
your opponent's best weeks. Like
So
like
it's
I
like
just like I just had a real down week, but lucky for me, Phil has been having a lot of down weeks lately, so we were able to persevere anyway.
right, yeah. Whereas like if you're actually playing a team in a real series, if the opposing team's pitchers are pitching well, then by definition that means that your hitters are not hitting well. So it's sort of a you know double whammy.
You probably want to start start noticing uh how many swings does your own team go on? Like, do you have high highs and low lows? Are you more in the middle? Kind of like when you look at a player and you see their trends as about all those bar graphs. So you could go to schedule,
Mm.
and when you look at your own schedule, the first result is your result always. So you can just kind of like eyeball it and see what your scoring trends tend to be, knowing that if you make the playoffs, you're gonna probably be and you wanna win. You don't wanna just get there and get eliminated immediately. You're probably gonna want to be able to reach that we talked about the average being around 544, and I'm pretty sure that's gone a little bit up just a tad. So you're probably gonna wanna know that your team has the ability to reach that, like,
Mm.
575 area. Like, if your average is a high average, but it's not too common for you to get to, like, 575 or 600, but the best teams in the league just have this knack of having huge weeks, it's gonna be hard to overcome that in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. What is your potential peak?
Yeah, because I can tell, I mean, like, we both of us have been in the playoffs several times. You're laser focused as you get into the playoffs and continue in the playoffs. You're not you're not taking a week off, so to speak, ever when you're in the playoffs. Whereas I admit, like, I see myself get a matchup with Phil, and Phil's been really struggling lately. I felt like I didn't have to really
Break out all
add
the
players
stops.
to my team. Yeah, like because whenever you add somebody, your opportunity costs, you're getting rid of somebody in your team. So I'd rather like, well, no one on free agency is like screaming to me,
Yeah.
and I don't need to bring this like like streamer, starting pitcher with 2 starts that I'm just gonna drop next week anyway, I think I can roll. Now we had a really big low, much more than I anticipated, but it worked out. Whereas when I'm against Matam, I'm like, "Oh no, I'm gonna make sure I have my 2-star pitchers ready because his team could explode at any moment, so I need to be prepared for that." And that's the default thinking in the playoffs.
Well, and there's a couple differences too, between, IRL baseball is, you have the deadline to make roster moves, and after a certain point, uh, you know, you can't put a player on your playoff roster if they weren't
Yeah.
on your team, however many, it's like a month before or something. I forget what it is. But, um, so you have that angle, and then the other angle is, um, you know, when it's the playoffs and when you're dealing with a keeper league with, at most 7 keepers, you can kind of freewheel a little more in the playoffs because it's like, okay, well, if this guy isn't part of my long-term plans, I don't have to worry about not having him next week because next week might not happen, and next year is a completely different year, and you sort of have a little more freedom in that sense to be bold and make big moves. Whereas like
Yeah.
a big league team isn't necessarily gonna make those dramatic, widespread changes at the last minute.
Yeah, no, in right now, in the fantasy league, everyone has their injuries. In fact, you might have so many injuries that one of your
Uh,
injured people
uh,
are are
Sorry, I had
are
something stuck in my throat there.
well, like, especially if you're a hoarder or not or you just love your players, you might have so many injuries you're choosing to keep some on your bench too, like you've used up all your IL spots. You're
Yeah,
you tend to if you're someone who plays like that in fantasy, you probably are not gonna pick up an interesting person from waivers because it would mean getting rid of this person you're waiting to come back for the injured list. Whereas as you end the playoffs, like you said, if I'm not gonna keep this person,
yeah.
then oh yeah,
If
I'm letting them go.
if they're injured and they're not coming back and there's not a high probability of them being useful, there's no reason to keep them on your
Well, I
roster.
think even if they are imagine you're in the quarterfinals. So that's when there's the final six. This year that's round two. And you have an injured player coming back supposedly next week. So that would be the semifinals. But you gotta get to the semifinals. I think
Yeah,
there's a good argument to just you gotta make the move.
and unless they're a keeper, then it's not like, "Oh, you're blowing it all for 1 game." It's like, "Well, you're not you might not be planning on keeping them anyways."
Now look,
Whereas
yes,
at
like
this
someone
point in the
could
season, I've got, like, Jordan on my
mm,
injured list. Like, I'm not gonna just drop him. He could be pretty good, uh, if he comes back and is healthy. But if it's, you know, quarterfinals, he could be getting the boot.
now yes, in my very specific example, uh if you drop someone, yes, another person could pick up that person for next week, and then, you're facing that person, and then he goes against you. Yes, that could happen, it's possible, but those are the decisions you gotta make, and you've gotta be thinking your opponents are gonna make those decisions too. So, all that to say, as you're evaluating your own season prospects, and I understand it's in my best interest to make all of you give up, so that's not exactly what I'm saying, but I'm saying you you figure out what are my chances right now if I was in the playoffs? And if my chances aren't good enough, how can I change that now? And
Yeah.
then do I want to? I mean, maybe you decide you don't want it. You're just gonna kind of plan for the future. That might mean trade someone who you can't keep for someone you can keep, and then hope you make the playoffs anyway. And kind of because the cool thing is the power of two starts is so good. You might be able to take a so-so roster, but hit on all your two-star pitchers and just get through the whole playoffs. It could happen.
Uh,
It's possible. Uh, But yeah, see the real thing would be because I think Jordan was your first round pick, if I'm not mistaken. So he's
He's he's early, I think.
so if
Uh,
his round value is 0, then he would be that would mean
yeah.
he was a first round pick. So that decision's easier. But if you had someone you could keep in the first round, let's say, but is injured, but you're trying to win the playoffs, now that's tough. So that's a they're not coming back this year. It's
Mhm.
done. Season-ending surgery. But if you could just find a way to not drop him, you can keep him next year in round 1 in my example. That would be tough because you wanna win. Like, I guess you would hope there's someone else to drop, but maybe, I don't know, I could see a future where for the playoffs, your entire bench is all pitchers and you pick them up all for, like, their future starts the next 2 weeks, so you don't wanna drop them, and the only guy left to drop is this one injured person. So that would be an interesting dilemma.
A lot of decision opportunities.
I just had Corbin Carroll go down. By the way, this is a lesson in cautiousness. On Monday, I saw the little Q next to Corbin Carroll, and it was just like the cliche, like discomfort. He was pulled from the game on Sunday or whatever. And I'm like, let's not take the chance. I'll put in. Uh, I chose to start Evan Carter from the Texas Rangers, who I picked up a couple weeks ago. Like, you know what? It also feels good, be like to use somebody I picked up. Like, I picked you up for depth, and it's time to use the depth.
Mm,
So kind of a just to make me feel good kind of thing. And I wanted to bench Anthony Volpe, which meant putting Javi
don't we
Baez at
all?
shortstop instead. Uh, yeah, it's a good thing we don't lose points for errors because I don't know if you know this. Anthony Volpe leads the
Uh,
American League in errors.
that's a Gold Glove, Anthony Volpe too.
Oh yeah, of course. Uh, but yeah, so like I didn't take a chance. Now it was risky. Corbin Carroll could have just been fine and played because I think the trouble was he was also like the Diamondbacks' first game was Tuesday, so like I wouldn't find out until the line is locked. So I had to just make a decision, and I decided that my roster depth was good enough that I could risk benching him this week, and it's paid off, so to speak, because he's in the injured list. Not that I'm happy because who knows how long he'll be out now, but uh, so you wanna take a gander on Monday. You have a lot of time. Unlike years past, the lineups don't lock until like each player's game comes up.
Uh,
So like if the person has a night game, you can change your mind on him all the way until his night game starts, or even his West Coast like 10 o'clock game.
yeah, you can set your like okay, this is the safe option, and then if it looks like he's gonna play, then you can make your move in case you
Granted,
forget.
you need somebody like in that example, like if you have someone on the Dodgers and you want to be able to replace them at like 9:45 p.m. Eastern time, you need somebody else on your bench who's also playing that late because otherwise they'll like lock on your bench. So it's not a perfect solution, but it it does help. It's easier when you're talking about someone who's just playing at 7 o'clock because most people play at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um, we also had some very down to the wire matchups this past week because I was talking upsets, and I still consider this an upset, even though the records are quite different. But another win for Nick as his matchup with Matab came down to the final day. We've had a couple all coming down to Sundays, and this has got to be a frustrating for Matab. He has a huge performance,
Uh,
scoring well over 700 points. He's helped by Vlad and Josh Chisholm, who's back from injury, Gunnar Henderson, Otani. He had his two-star pitchers come through and pitch well. So all good stuff. Unfortunately, Nick's team showed out even more.
yeah, and that was even with getting nothing from Tyler McGill. Uh,
Well, yeah, but look who he did get points from.
uh, the big dumper.
The big dumper himself, Cal Raleigh, over 100 points. And yeah, 5 home runs in the week will do that.
Yeah, he's something else. Yeah, and that's, well, what is the gap between him and the next best, catcher this season? I mean, that's gotta be the biggest positional gap, uh,
which is
in the
so
league,
weird.
and it might be bigger.
It's been so long since catcher had that because it used to be like, oh, you got to get Yadier Molina or
Travis
Buster
Kelce.
Posey. Yeah, Travis Kelce if it was football. Uh, I have the answer for you. Cal Raleigh right now has scored 704 points as of midweek on matchup 13. The next highest scoring catcher is Will Smith with 461. That is 250 points clearance, which is
Wow.
insane. Nobody else is in the stratosphere. It's and even worse, like the next 5 catchers are semi-similar. Actually, let's say the next 4 catchers. So it's not like you can get one of those catchers and stay like you had to have Kyle Raleigh to stand out in catcher.
Yeah.
In fact, there's only 2 players in all of fantasy baseball that have scored more points as a hitter than Kyle Raleigh. Any guesses
Uh,
as who they are?
well, one of them has to be, Arson Judge.
Good old Arson Judge. Indeed.
Yeah.
He actually is still even in his slump is still 100 almost 150 points above Cal Raleigh. Aaron Judge the highest scoring hitter right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's an easy one. Um, this is gonna this seems obvious, but is trying to think of anyone who'd be above Shohei, and nothing's coming to mind. So that might be what I go with.
Your instincts have served you well, Shohei Ohtani. So yes,
Yeah, there you
Aaron
go.
Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Cal Raleigh, which is crazy. Cal Raleigh. I mean, he was good, but this is amazing.
I mean, in the history of our league, I mean, this has to be as strong of a catching performance as we've ever seen. Like, there's no way, even in the
Well,
early years, like
let me
Salvador
put it this way.
Perez.
Last season, Cal Raleigh himself scored 787 points the entire season.
Well,
And the highest scoring catcher overall was William Contreras with 1,021 points. So he's like 3/4 of the way to the highest scoring catcher last year. And we're not past the halfway point in like we're not at the All-Star break even yet,
yeah.
which is but I don't know, pick a year. When was the height? Like 2011 was Joe Mauer times probably.
Mm, yeah, what year was he on the cover?
No, CBS. I thought CBS was gonna give me 2011 stats, but they failed me. They only have Salvador Perez. Okay. I think the player has to actually be in like still playing now. Here you go. 2019. I'll give you Yasmani Grandal as the highest scored catcher at 979 points.
Mhm.
Uh 2018, JT Real Muto with 760 points. So yeah, Kyle Raleigh's doing crazy stuff. Never seen it before. It's basically the dream. People always say, like, let me get the best catcher in the league to have that advantage over everybody else. But the problem is, like, you draft that person in like round 3, let's say, and then it turns out they're not a standout. They're very good, but not a standout compared to everybody else. But Kyle Raleigh has been amazing and
Yeah.
a big reason for Nick's success for sure. On top of like all of his pitching, we also had shockingly, un inexplicably, another titan of the league taken down by Coach Rachel. As this time she has a no doubt about it great week because all the other you could have called every other one flukes. This wasn't a fluke. As Rachel scores 673.5 points. monster performances from Byron Buxton and even old Charlie Morton. Look at that. Very nice, very nice.
I thought he was cooked.
No, apparently he's still Nemo. Uh, she tanks her multiple zeros to achieve this score. Uh, if Rachel wins her matchup this week, she will be out of last place for the first time all season. So we shall see
Don't
if
you put that evil on me.
uh so that'd be something. Yeah, I think the most interesting matchups this week. Let's just take a look. Um well, first of all, we're fighting each other if you haven't noticed.
Yes.
But because it's interesting because we're the hosts of this podcast, but I have to say I do not concern myself with the battles of the lower teams right now. So I have
Yeah.
my eyes ahead of me.
Well, I think you're lucky. I had a last minute injury to my starting catcher Von Herrera, because otherwise this might be looking a little different. And as it is, the projections are showing a pretty close matchup. So
Yeah, you have the lead right now, and you're projected to keep the league, but we'll see. My own catcher change has actually not worked out at all. I believed in young Dylan Dingler of the Tigers, but hopefully, uh,
still a net
he
positive on the week.
on the week, yes, but I picked him up like a couple weeks ago. But the biggest moment for me, um, is gonna be tomorrow. So I really thought about this. I don't know if anyone in the league has have to make this decision. Good pitcher going into Colorado. So I decided
Mm,
that Kershaw's been good enough lately that I'm trusting him in Colorado tomorrow. I could have uh benched him and thrown Nick Martinez instead. I had another, or I could have just picked someone up from waivers and gone with that. But I'm hoping like how scared does the Colorado make you? The the high air or thin air, I mean high altitude.
yeah, well, I was actually just about to look. I wish I could. I'd like to do the split. Okay, yes. If I do home games 2025 year to date and sort by uh, OPS, um, the Colorado Rockies, interesting. They are 13th in team hitting. That is,
13th in their league or 13th in
and
both
all
leagues?
in both leagues. So within the National League, uh, they're sixth. That's surprising given how horrible they are. If I switch it to away games, and this is per MLB.com, uh, they are 14th in the National League and 29th in all of baseball, behind
This
only, take a guess?
I could throw in some Marlins action maybe.
No, it would be the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Pirates.
So, yeah, if I do no splits, then um, yeah, the Marlins are. Uh, 10th
Okay, I gotta say that doesn't make me feel good.
yeah, that's
However,
that's that's higher than I thought. In
uh,
your defense, I was not expecting that.
because I just think like they got nobody. They got scrubs. The only people who have positive impact on their team on offense are like high average contact hitters. So even then, I'm like, all right, I could allow like a single and a double, and then get the next three guys out. Like I'm not worried about it. But if they're sixth in the NL, hmm,
Yeah, that's frankly quite shocking, actually. Like, I obviously, everyone knows the Coors bump, but for a team that what's their, winning percentage right now? MLB
Oh, does it start
standings?
with a 1? I think they
I
got up
think
to
it
starting
might.
with a 2 now.
Okay, yeah, they're up to 228.
Okay, great.
Uh, yeah, so they're, like,
Yeah,
easily the worst team, and yet
yeah.
at home, their offense is not bad, so that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yep, that's, tomorrow, and luckily, it'll be too late for someone to track me down when I reveal this, but I will be in attendance to give my support to Mr. Kershaw.
Ah.
So hopefully my attendance is appreciated and he throws a perfect game. That that would be, even though, like, he's been throwing 5 innings to start lately, but still, that's, that's what I want. So I think that's the what to watch. If we had a what to watch for segment, that's a what to watch for. Um,
Indeed.
we also have, like I said, we have 2 of the bottom teams facing each other right now in Viraj and Rachel, and a lot's on the line for Rachel. If she can pull out the victory, she gets out of last place for the first time. So there's that to watch for. Uh, and then Brian's matchup against Nick. It doesn't look good. Right now, it's projected for another absolute monster week for Nick. Cal Raleigh has already scored 26 points this week, which is amazing. And that's with 0 for 3 strikeouts today. But I just point out because Brian on this show and then even on the Facebook group has been touting his desire to take out a bit like he had a facing 3 of the big teams, so he was gonna take them all out, and he succeeded last week, but it will be a tall order for him to make this comeback this week. But he does have more starting pitchers remaining, and that's the great equalizer. If you go into the week with more starters than your opponent, great opportunity to just overwhelm them if they have good starts.
Yeah.
So for the rest of this podcast, I think it's just only natural to talk about the current American League. And I don't know if the National League looks like this as well, but we basically have the same situation. We have the uh, a whole slew of teams that are not named the Chicago White Sox,
Yeah.
be- believing that they could succeed this year. So so as a fan of the team, so try to be an independent baseball observer. Per that's from the WFAN coined that term. Independent baseball observer. When is you giving your team the blessing to stop trying? Like
Uh,
no longer making winning decisions for the current year.
when you trade your best player and your
Yeah.
your team, uh, gets objectively worse. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, there's a couple factors. Uh, different franchises have different expectations in terms of, going all the way versus
Okay, I was curious if you're gonna go there. All right. Yeah, so
making
so
the
like
playoffs. So,
so
like,
organizational expectations is one factor.
yeah, that it has to be. I think recent history is a factor. Um, and I think, um, the general, um, how the roster is built in terms of the expected playoff and or championship window. If you're at the end of your window, um, then I'd be more inclined to make a push because it's like this might be our last real shot. If you haven't been in the playoffs in quite some time, I'd be more inclined to uh, make a push. Um,
Yeah, I
but
see it as there's 2 levels. There's a good chance we're gonna make it should we try to get better to be more competitive, and then there's right now we
yeah,
might not make it. Should we get better so that we can make the push to get in it at all? Because
yeah,
otherwise the other 2 examples are, like, you're awful, so of course you're not gonna try, and if you're already, like, winning your division, then there's a temptation to just cruise and do
coast, yeah.
nothing. Yeah.
I mean, I think most fans want to compete no matter what, but for the latter case you mentioned, like personally, uh, I lean more towards not going all in if your team isn't that great. Um, and maybe that's, because I've been, you know, spoiled with championships in my life. But if your odds are low, you know, going all in, for a pretty low percentage chance, I don't know. I it feels like you're mortgaging the future. I mean, like the Red Sox at this point, they are sort of right on the edge. They're in that position. They haven't been to the playoffs since 21. Um, and even then, that was, frankly, kind of fluky. Um, but r- realistically, what are their World Series odds?
Well,
As,
it starts with pitching, starting pitching, so it's like, okay,
yeah,
match me up with somebody in a 5-game series. I mean, grant to be fair, there's a 3-game series for the wild card series too, but, like, start there and then because I
you
think
need
that's the default, right?
you need to have at a minimum two pitchers that you know for sure. Like this is who we're going to game one. This is who we're going to game two. And then if you don't know who it is game three, that's when, okay, maybe, that's who we make a move for is, someone who could be our number three. But if you just got one, that's when I'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
it's always
if
tough.
you have
Remember
a number,
last year though? Like last year, the Tigers had 2 starting pitchers they could trust, and rather than trade for a third, they traded away Jack Flaherty and were left with only 1.
yeah,
And then they said they happened to make the playoffs anyway, and it was crazy to watch them go to work, but it was really only Trick Skubal and then, like, bullpen game, bullpen game, Trick
yeah.
Skubal, bullpen game.
Yeah, I mean, during the regular season, number one and a bunch of threes and fours works,
Work,
but that that that's a that's a
right.
tall order in the playoffs.
So what about, like, I don't know, just the Royals made the playoffs last year. They were excited. And right now, they are if you're like people who by the way, are you one of those people like, "I follow loss column." Do you like doing that? Or are you just gonna go, "Let the game's back?"
I don't really care at this point in the season about like I think when you're dealing like with the last 2 weeks in September and you're 2 games out, like then I'll kind of look at the loss column, but uh, yeah, not in June.
So in that case, by games back, the Royals are 3.5 back of the 3rd wildcard spot right now, but they're overall are 3 games under 500, a negative run differential. Um, so, like, vibes are low in Kansas City, but by math, like, they're there, just like all the other various teams that are floating around them.
Yeah,
So if yeah.
I mean, vibes are obviously huge. part of it, and, well, frankly, if I were, any team in the Central, I would have done more in the offseason. Waiting until the trade deadline is just, if you think you're good enough to compete, you know, go all in early and be a better team to start the season because those wins count just as much. Um, so there's that. Um, but if the team isn't showing spark or they have flaws, like if it's their offense that's, not really doing anything. And if there's not a clear path to shore that up, or if it's obvious that like we can't just sign one guy to fix this, um, then I would not be itching to, you know, get rid of assets,
By the way,
for them.
your assessment is correct. In the American League, they have the fewest runs scored of anybody.
Yeah, I mean
But their
that's
pitching's good enough that their run differential it's negative, but it's only -25.
I mean if you're too far into one extreme, that's how you get chewed up and spit out in the playoffs.
Yeah, and then obviously, like, you're gonna if you're gonna sneak in as a 3rd wild card under the current format, that means you're in the wild card series and you're facing the 3rd highest division winner. So right now, that's the Yankees. So that would mean the Royals face the Yankees in a 3-game series in New York, and that'll be true for whatever division winner is. Whereas I have you warmed up at all to this playoff format? Like months ago we talked about it briefly when we were talking rules. So I the thing I've noticed because I'm in it right now is because the 3rd division winner gets bumped off into the wild card series, it does prevent me from trying to say, like, because like, 2 weeks ago, the AL East was much far further apart than it is right now. I was like, "Oh, great, like, I don't have to worry about much because 'cause we'll just cruise and win our division to make the playoffs, even if we're not a good team." But if you do that, then you'll just end up winning your division, but having to play the division series anyway, kind of pushing me to not be content and, like, try to be better so that I'm not the 3rd division winner.
Yeah, I don't know. I preferred one or two iterations back, I think. Um, where you had the one game, wild card, and frankly, I think too many teams get into it. Um, you know, too many teams that are just, you know, mediocre. I don't know. I I have a whole soapbox I could get on when it
Yeah,
comes
don't worry.
to
Hold
the
back the
playoff
soapbox for now. Tease.
format.
We'll
Um,
tease you for a future week for the playoffs. But I'm
uh,
just saying
I
it's
think
a silver lining. I do like that I can't just be content with winning my division. I need to be good and win my division.
sure, but I think the flip side is like if you're the central, like, well, I guess the Tigers are
Well, right now it's
at the
us.
top.
We
Yeah,
are the central right now.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's maybe that is, but I don't know if I think the Yankees would be pushing regardless because they can afford it, and to them, it's World Series or bust.
Okay. That's a fair. Like you're
But I
saying,
don't think that's the case for every team.
yeah, usually it would be the Central Division, and if the Central Division chooses or feels like they can't spend to improve at the deadline, but they have an amazing, exciting season and win their division, their excitement gets ruined because they don't get the bye. so
Mhm.
it feels the same, like their accomplishments kind of taken away.
Yeah, and then at that point, like, you wouldn't necessarily make the push to win the division over the wild card because the outcome is not that dissimilar.
Mhm, mhm. So to summarize, so we're taking into if you're deciding to if you're a mid team and deciding to buy or sell, and we're not being like the way you described the Red Sox last time with these weird buy sell combos. No, no, no. We are choosing either to buy or sell. So we're taking into account your organizational expectations will be one of them. I'm actually not sure if we mentioned it, but obviously like what you're doing right now, like
Mhm,
like, are you 5 games out or 10 games out or 2 games out? So, like, your situation, and then you're self-evaluating what you kinda like the same we talked about for RTG baseball, but how well do you think you're gonna do in the playoffs, which in
yeah,
IRL baseball is probably you start at your starting rotation, find out because if you're trading to improve your rotation, then you're not trading to improve your offense. So, if your offense is bad and you only have 2 bona fide start and, we're talking like, you want a pitcher that can go deep too. Like, I
mhm.
think you can't just have your 3 ERA pitcher. You need a 3 ERA pitcher who could get to the 7th inning.
Well, it goes back to why, I think there should be a more prevalent, innings per start stat. If you strike out, 11 guys and have a 2 ERA, but you only ever go 5 innings, you know how much do you take that over, someone who's got a 3 ERA, but consistently, gives you closer to 7 innings?
By the way, I just noticed on MLB standings, they have a record against over 500 teams, which is just
Mm,
cool to look at. Like, if you're looking at the AL wild card, the 3 teams in it is the Rays, the Blue Jays, and the Mariners, but the Rays are very good against over 500 teams, whereas the Jays and Mariners are both below 500.
I've never
So,
quite known what to make of that, or, like, at what point that stat becomes predictive.
well, and predictive of what even? Like, you'd have to decide what do you even think it should predict at all? And
Sure.
then, is it predictive? And you just scroll down, like, all these AL teams are all, like, bad against 500 teams. I wonder, like, should you expect to be 500 against 500? I wonder what is supposed to be good and bad, but all I can tell you is that the division winners are all over 500, or the division leaders, I should say, and then everybody else is
Hmm,
either 500 or worse, except Tampa in the AL.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, for me personally, if I were in charge of a team, I think there's very few teams that have a realistic shot at winning the World Series, and my only goal would be to win the World Series, and so, if I didn't think I had a shot, I'd be focusing on the long term, for when I do have a shot
Okay,
that
let me
feels
just put
realistic.
so before we end here, let me just push you on that just a little further. So, okay, we talked about the Royals. And so the Royals, if they decide it's not worth it, they should think to 2026. They have some starting pitchers that are either have 1 year left or 2 years left that they could trade, and it would not be devastating to their future. Hopefully, if they were wise, they would replace that pitcher by signing a free agent. But Baltimore having a real disappointing season this year,
Mm,
but the people on their team that other teams would want, like, they
or the
built their team
long-term
this way.
pieces.
They're long-term pieces. They're the
Yeah.
young, long-term, so that
Yeah.
now what do we do?
No, that's a good question. Like, you know, for the Red Sox, like, you have someone like Chapman. That's an easy if you're looking to sell, you sell that piece. He's 37, one-year deal, having a renaissance season. That's an obvious trade piece, but, you're looking at, like, what is Adley Rutschman? Like, you know, discussed that before. I don't know. Is he, you know
Well, he really turned it like, he had just turned it around, and then he's injured now. So now it's
well,
like, if I
exactly,
trade him,
like,
he's like, not like, they got players who are they'd be selling low, but even their low, it would get you back, like, good pieces because of
yeah.
all the control and the age.
If I were them, I wouldn't be buying, uh, but I'd be, like, very careful selling, and I think you still kinda have to like, I don't think you can go full tear down rebuild. That would just to me, it would be worth it to see if this core can be salvaged and can figure it out. I think it would just be such a long spiral.
Yeah, no one wants to hear this. I think I agree because 'cause you're basically saying do nothing. Like,
Yeah,
make your obvious, like, if you like,
like
they have a couple of contract year people, make the obvious ones, but
mhm,
otherwise stand pat, and no fan wants to hear do nothing, but I think I agree with you.
yeah. I 'cause mm, I think you just have to hope it works out. 'Cause I don't know, frankly, if you're gonna get a ton of return for them. And then what happens if you trade them off and then they figure it out? Like, that's even worse, you know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could the only thing I'll say other than doing nothing, if you decide you're really hurting in the pitching side, perhaps, like, one of their young outfielders is Colton Cowser. People dress
Ooh.
up as cows and moo for him in the ballpark. You could risk it and trade him if you're getting back another, like, problematic starting pitcher, and you're like, "I understand Colton Cowser may become a very good player, but I'm hoping this starting pitcher becomes a very good player." And it's not and but it's not with the expectation that you're gonna even make the playoff like, it's just a
Yeah.
trade like, rather than wait for the offseason, I sense that this team is trying to get off of the player right now, so I'm gonna act now. If I wait until the offseason, they might trade him to somebody else, that type of thing.
Yeah, and that goes back to, as well, like, organizational, uh, expectations and firepower. You know, not every team can go and, uh, make the trade for, Crochet and, give them an extension. Um, but I mean, be it interesting is if they, like, this would be kind of wild if they made a move for, Sandy Alcantara, even though
I was
they're
just
not,
thinking about him.
looking to compete this year, you know, maybe they have, pieces like Colton Cows or, someone deeper in their farm system that they, have the assets to make that move. And even though they're not going to compete this year, maybe that sets them up going forward. I don't know.
Yeah, because you only like, ideally, like, the only problem with that is the Marlins, because I have no idea what the Marlins are doing, but
No one does.
hyp hypothetically, if they don't believe in themselves at all, then they also don't believe in themselves next year, so they should not be trading for someone that helps them next year, it should be someone that helps them, like, multiple years in the future, even though
Mhm.
they've been trying to do that for decades now, but, uh,
I'm not sure what
whereas
they've
the
been trying to do, if I'm being honest.
But the Orioles, they like actively wouldn't like I don't know how deep in the prospect game you are, but like the Padres have like Leo DeVries, I believe. Um,
Uh,
like excellent prospect, very young. Like you wouldn't expect him necessarily to appear next year. So even though you would be like celebrated as an organization for trading for him, but by the time he's ready, like your other players are in arbitration now. So you would probably want to trade for a lesser prospect with a sooner ETA if you're the Orioles, but not if you're the Marlins.
uh,
So just be curious who ends up matching up. But yes, hopefully we gave just some insight at least into deciding to go for it or not. Uh, it could all be moot by the time we get to the end of July. Maybe it's actually very clear who's selling and not. It's just so funny both in our league and in real life. Like there's a whole lot of mid teams right now, and those mid teams are close to each other too. So it's I don't know
yeah.
how things are going to shake out.
Well, and it's very closely tied to the the number of playoff spots. If you only had 4 teams making the playoffs, there'd be a lot of teams that are fringe teams now that would be long gone and would be packing it in. But
Oh yeah,
for a lot of teams, it's
yeah,
like, well, you get in, maybe you pull Diamondbacks, who knows?
yeah. Maybe go for it. So that's all the time we have this week. For all you supposed mid teams, at least according to me, I'm calling you mid. We'll see if any of you prove me wrong. Will you be able to separate yourselves from the pack? That is the question. Any last words, good sir?
Um, I I think the Red Sox should pack it in and trade Chapman while his value is high. Because according to Craig Breslow, um, trading your good players makes you better.
It's a bold uh, process of thinking here. Uh, how smug will he be though if you make the playoffs anyway? He will feel on top of the world.
Oh, yeah, and I won't feel afraid of any other team either. So,
It's all part of the plan. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until we speak again. Ciao.